As the 2020 race heats up to be a battle over whose mother washed more floors for less money, we ask when victimhood became a substitute for virtue. Fortunately, we are joined by Peter Boghossian and Jim Lindsay, authors of the infamous Grievance Studies Experiment that got papers on human reactions to rape culture and queer performativity at urban dog parks in Portland, Oregon, published in peer-reviewed academic journals. Then Kamala Harris flip-flops on Medicare For All in record time. She really is Hillary 4.0. Finally, some bad pop culture and voter fraud in Texas. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. New date, new time. Our next episode of Daily Wire Backstage has been rescheduled for the evening of February 5th. Daily Wire God King Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Alicia Krause, and little old me will be smoking stogies, breaking down the issues of the day, separating the MAGA from the non-MAGA, and enjoying those sweet, sweet, delicious leftist tears. Will we finally see President Trump deliver the State of the Union? I don't know, maybe. Tune in on Tuesday to find out. As always, only Daily Wire subscribers get to ask the questions, so make sure to subscribe today. Lot to get to today. The Howard Schultz for President campaign is rolling along beautifully. It is creating big divisions within the Democrat Party. It is causing Kamala Harris to immediately switch up her strategy for 2020, and it's all leading toward victimhood and grievance. Howard Schultz just doesn't get it, but our guests coming up, Peter Boghossian and Jim Lindsay, do. First, let me tell you about Spear. We'll make a little money, honey. Listen, when you write, I know this better than anybody, sometimes you're just staring at a blank page. Now, for some of us, this becomes a best-selling book, but for others, it's really frustrating, and it's called writer's block. Spear fixes this. Spear is not a word processor, primarily. It is a thought processor. And that blank page is not a very good thought processor, but Spear helps you organize your thoughts. You can move it around. It's ingenious. I really like it. I've been using it myself. Most people hate writing because they can't organize their thoughts. Spear can make that happen. It's like working with Legos for words. All your content is auto-saved, backed up, and encrypted. You can create your best written work for articles, books, documents, or whatever else you dream of. A lot of people write into me, they say they have trouble writing columns or writing blogs or writing a book. They want to know how to get started. Spear is a great way to get started because it will make organizing your thoughts so much easier. This week, my listeners can get Spear for just $3.75 per month for your first year of service. That's a 25% discount off the regular price. Sign up today by going to spear.com/Knowles, Knowles. That is Spear with an E, like who? Like Shakespeare. If you don't know that, then organize your thoughts, you know? Come on, man. Get on it with Spear. Check it out, spear.com/Knowles. Okay. The Howard Schultz for President campaign could not possibly be going better. Howard Schultz was on MSNBC. He's discussing his independent bid for president. He's been a lifelong Democrat, but the Democrat Party has moved very far left. He could never win the Democrat primary today, so he's running as an independent. This is a billionaire, and already Democrats are throwing tomatoes at him. They don't want him to run. They hate him. He's a plutocrat. He's a billionaire. He's a straight white man. Here's how Howard Schultz responds.
Why not just run as a Democrat? We know you are a Democrat. You've given to Hillary Clinton. You've supported her candidacy.
I have been a Democrat, but I am.
So are you no longer a Democrat?
No, I'm not a Democrat. I don't affiliate myself with the Democratic Party, who's so far left, who basically wants the government to take over health care, which we cannot afford, the government to give free college to everybody, and the government to give everyone a job, which basically is $40 trillion on the balance sheet of $21.5 trillion. We can't afford it. What can we do? What we need is comprehensive tax reform. What we need is sensible solutions to immigration. All of these things cannot happen under the current environment. Now, I've also been criticized for being a billionaire. Let's talk about that. I'm self-made. I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York. I thought that was the American dream, the aspiration of America. You're going to criticize me for being successful?
Yes, yes. I'm not going to criticize you for being successful, but the Democrats will criticize you for being successful because the left gets everything backwards. We've talked about this for weeks now on the show. It's become clearer every day. The left gets it all backwards. To a large portion of America, being a self-made billionaire is not the dream. For a large portion of America, to the left, the American dream is to be the most aggrieved. It is to be the biggest victim, to check off all the victimhood boxes. That is the dream. That is what people are trying to do now. There are a lot of people who were born into immense privilege who pretend that they weren't. A great example of this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She grew up in a nicer town than I did. She grew up right next door to where I did, a very affluent county, one of the richest in the country. She grew up there from the age 5 all the way up through college. She attended a private college. According to her voting records, she lived in ritzy northern Westchester until just 2 years ago. And what does she do? She pretends she's Jenny from the block. It's not my phrase. She tweets it out. She says, I'm still Alex from the Bronx. She's pretending that she's had a worse upbringing, a worse education, a more difficult, aggrieved experience of life than she has, because people are ashamed on the left of success and privilege. And so they even flip humility and modesty. True humility does away with false modesty. But what these people are is really prideful. They're really prideful, and they don't want to admit the privileges that they've had. They don't want to be thankful for it. They don't want to aspire to even greater privileges. They want to flip it. They want to say, no, I didn't have any leg up in life. No, I didn't. No, I had it really hard. My mother washed more floors for less money than your mother did. That's what they all say. They've flipped success and victimhood, and victimhood today carries a cachet. This is why, when you look around at college campuses, there has been a whole, what's called the campus rape epidemic. So many of the biggest of these stories, the most widely read, the UVA story, the gang rape story in Rolling Stone, so many of the high-profile stories have proven to be hoaxes. The Duke Lacrosse one, obviously, Mattress Girl at Columbia. On and on. We did a show about a month or two ago where we went through about a dozen of these. Why is it that all these huge stories turn out to be hoaxes? Because victimhood carries a cachet. It carries a social currency. People want it. They think it makes them more virtuous. And this is our new vision of the world from the left. This isn't how the right views things, and this is creating a real division. It's why Howard Schultz's candidacy will probably hand the election to Donald Trump, so thank you, Howard. But also, it would be quite instructive to America, because I do think there are people who are traditionally on the left, or traditionally Democrats, who say, gosh, they're really getting everything backwards here. Gosh, I don't want to live in a world where victimhood is something to aspire to. Maybe, and so his candidacy, I think, will show that fissure in the Democrat Party. The trouble for him is that the people who think that, I think, are just going to vote for Trump. I don't think that they're going to vote for Howard Schultz. It's that issue, the sort of, I'm a fiscal conservative but a social liberal that we were talking about yesterday. The actual people who want that very narrow appeal are pretty small, but the people who are traditionally Democrats, they consider themselves progressive, they don't care about sexual issues. They haven't really thought through pro-life. Whatever. They want to be reasonable. They see the left right now spiraling down, and things happen slowly, and then they happen all at once. And I think we're seeing the all at once part of that now. You had over time the cache identity politics, multiculturalism. Okay, now this is certain privileges are bad, okay, And now we're spiraling down into this subjectivism, this idea that we have to invent our own pain, we have to invent our own realities. You even had then Anthony Kennedy, when he was on the Supreme Court, say that people have a right to define reality. But of course, nobody has the right to define reality. You're entitled to your opinion, but it might be incorrect. You don't get to define it, and you certainly don't get to define it for everybody else. We're seeing that all at once, and it leads us into grievance studies. This is a phenomenon that's happened at colleges where they're not studying history, philosophy, English, whatever, math. They're studying ethnicity and gender studies. And it's really just ideology. It's not a traditional academic discipline. And it becomes more and more ridiculous. My guests coming up, Peter Boghossian and Jim Lindsay, submitted a number of academic papers to peer-reviewed academic journals, and 7 of them have been accepted. I think another 7 of them were accepted but not published, or revise and resubmit, or whatever. Actually, even more than that. Only a few of them were rejected before, I think it was actually a conservative journalist pointed out that these were probably fake, and they exposed a major flaw in the academy, a major flaw in our grievance culture. We will get to them in just one second, but first, let's introduce a new sponsor and thank our new sponsor for keeping the lights on in the show on the air. Valentine's Day is fast approaching, so you need to know about Halo. You need to check out a product called Indulgences.store. Indulgences, not .com, .store. What are you going to do for Valentine's Day? I've been caught on this. Flowers often are disappointing. They're way overpriced by Valentine's Day. They often come and they're all wilted. They only last for a few days. So then you say, okay, let me get some chocolates or something. But then you hear, I can't eat chocolates. I'm too fat. They're fattening. I'll only eat one, then you throw out the rest of the box. This year, do something original and indulgent for Valentine's Day, something that rings the bell at Indulgences.store, not .com, .store. You can, together with Halo Healthy Tribes, see an indulgent line of hot beverage mixes. You just add water for some of the most sumptuous mugs of hot cocoa and other flavors. They have Mazaru, matcha, yogi goji, pink velvet, whole latte lovin'. Ooh, I love me a good pun. I love it almost as much as I like a mug of cocoa. It's great. It's 100% natural. It's no added sugar. They're loaded with MCT oil in addition to being 100% natural. They're just terrific. OrganicAuthority.com called MCT oil the newest healthy fat nutrition craze. It's just, they're really advantageous for you and for your health. They bypass the small intestine. They're metabolized directly into the body. It's similar if you've heard of bulletproof coffee. The MCT oil is the driving ingredient there. These indulgent beverages are available in Valentine's Day gift packages starting as low as $39, but step up and be a man. Indulge her with all 6 flavors or save even more and enroll her in the subscription program to get 12 additional flavors. It's just great. If you enter COVFEFE, C-O-V-F-E-F-E at checkout, you save 10%. If you order before February 3rd, you'll also save $5 off shipping and handling. Act quickly, save money, get the Valentine's Day gift covered. She will love it. It'll last for a month. Indulgences.store. Promo code COVFEFE, C-O-V-F-E-F-E, 10% off. Indulgences.store. Do it now. Don't be caught on Valentine's Day. Promo code COVFEFE, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. That's Indulgences with an S at the end, .store. Let's get to our guests. Peter, Jim, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for having us on.
You two are my heroes, and I should point out, you're not conservatives.
Nope.
You're not Christians.
Nope.
You are both left-wing.
Yep.
You are both atheists.
Correct.
That is absolutely correct.
And yet, we agree. We completely agree. You are an inspiration to me because what we're talking about is reality.
All right.
You guys have very different views of reality than I do. Religious truth, political reality, and yet we're at least talking about reality. And that's the big difference here between us and the intersectional crowd who believes that a paper titled Human Reactions to Rape Culture and Queer Performativity at Urban Dog Parks in Portland, Oregon could be a real peer-reviewed academic paper.
Not only,
but
also honored for exemplary scholarship in feminist geography.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We should explain to people who don't know what peer review is, what peer review is.
So peer review is a system where where academics want to make sure that scholarly research is up to scratch. So the idea would be, I want to write a paper, I've done my research, I've read things, maybe I did an experiment, maybe I did this, and before I'm going to publish that paper, I'm not going on my blog and putting it out there. Before I publish that paper, I'm going to send it to other experts in the field who know their stuff. Ideally, they're not going to know who I am, I'm not going to know who they are, so there's no conflict of interest involved. That's blind peer review, which is the standard now. And they're going to go through my paper and they're going to say, this part's okay, this part's bad, this part needs fixing. Have you considered these insights? Did you use the right statistical methods? Did you use the correct logic to get to the conclusion? They're going to go through and pick my paper apart for everything that's wrong with it while giving some constructive, positive feedback as well. And then I'm going to have to fix up my paper and make sure that other experts in the field, at least 2, sometimes 4 or more, are going to check off and say, yeah, this paper actually meets scholarly credentials and deserves to be published as scholarship. And then they'll make a recommendation to the journal editor who says, real experts that know this field well recognize this as a contribution.
And so papers that have passed peer review, that have been accepted as a genuine contribution to scholarship, written by you guys under pseudonyms, would include, who are they to judge overcoming anthropometry and a framework for fat bodybuilding, as well as going in through the back door, challenging straight male homo hysteria and transphobia through receptive, penetrative sex toy use.
Yeah, that one's got a lot of big words. Let me sum that one down for you a little bit, boil that down. It was that straight men are transphobic, clearly, and they can fix that by putting things in their butt.
And they thought this was a great idea.
It's brilliant. I mean, it's such a genuine contribution. And you guys, you're a mathematician.
Yeah.
You are a philosopher. Right. You are in the academy or refugees from the academy.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you experiencing professional kickback from this? You published this hoax.
Right.
It had to be done. You are exposing this shallow, ridiculous academic culture. What's the ramification?
Well, many people have been incredibly supportive, and many people from all across the political spectrum. People, I'd get, for example, emails. It might seem odd that I, as an evangelical Christian, are writing in support of the author of a manual for creating atheists, but I want to say that I support you, or conservatives will chime in on that. So there has been a lot of support. The administration is, one might say, not too happy with
They're
this.
less supportive.
They're less, thank you. That was lovely. There's a wonderful politic answer. They're less supportive of me in this context, yeah.
Now, what you have done is actually a great service to the academy. There is a crisis of the academy. We saw just in psychology, there was that replication crisis a few years ago. Yeah. They couldn't replicate all of these studies. Right. Peer review, by the way, for those of you who have friends in academia, has been so abused. Very often it's professors pass this down to grad students who skim, who let the nonsense go through. This is a major crisis. And one of the biggest issues is, I notice as a millennial, a lot of millennial friends, millennials are supposedly the most educated generation in history. And they certainly have the most degrees, the most credentials, most of them go to college. And yet they might be the most ignorant generation I've ever come across. How does that work? What is the conflict?
Well, if it depends on what they're being taught and how they're being challenged, right? To become truly educated means not just to be exposed to lots and lots of courses, but to be exposed to relevant ideas within your field, but also challenging ideas that make you think outside of your field. I see there's actually this kind of internet subculture movement building up to try to find an alternative to the university, and I don't like it personally. I think that the idea of the university in its essence should be that same as peer review, you have experts who guide students and challenge their thinking, give them viewpoints that they don't agree with, and make them work through how they might understand that perspective better. And if it's wrong, they should learn to articulate the arguments for why it's wrong. And if it's right, then they can try to work through some of that. But there's been this increasing institutionalization of a certain kind of thought that our papers are really trying to dig into, is that there's a certain shallowness, like you were saying, to if we're going to talk about issues of cultural relevance like race or gender or so on, then you don't have to, you just know the right answer. This is the right answer. If you put that on your test, you get the grade, and if you don't, you don't. So you have this problem, and then you go into institutionalizing that into the general education requirement instead of, say, something like civics or Western civilization. I had to take American history. Many of my friends were dependent on a degree at my school.
What a bigoted school would make you take American history. I'm so outraged.
It was required for every degree except engineering, and they had to take Western Civ. I don't know why, but whatever. Yeah. And so these were things that were happening before, but now you can fill this in with Asian studies or some such. And so there's a degree of that happening, I'm sure. There have also been, other factors, not to put it all on like grievance studies, because, for example, when I was finishing my degree, they actually, in my state, which was Tennessee, by state mandate, cut the number of hours required for a bachelor's degree so that more people would be able to get them. So there are political factors as well.
Right. Lowering of standards.
Lowering of standards.
And one of the things that I've seen happen that I'm deeply concerned about is that there's a lack of intellectual diversity in the academy. Yeah. And I think it's a tremendous problem when, for example, and I don't know, this may showcase a difference of ours, I don't know, I've never spoken to you about this, but a person in my class had commented about, he does not believe global warming is anthropogenic. And he said, And I thought this was a great point. It's totally legitimate. Why should we believe this? We already know that the overwhelming majority of professors you've proven it, they adhere to a radical leftist intersectional worldview. They're the same folks writing this, so why should I believe that?
Right, their credibility is so in question.
Yeah, that's why we need more diversity in the academy, and that's why we need to look at the scholarship that comes out. We need something to rely upon, and we can't do that now.
And this, to your point before, I love the university. I like the idea of the university, to use John Henry Newman's phrase. I don't want to give up the university to these lunatics who are attacking it from within. So you've come in and taken a stand, and it's worth pointing out, too, what grievance studies is, because you come from philosophy, you come from mathematics. I majored in history. These are liberal arts. These are, now, increasingly in universities, you'll have new departments, women's, gender, and
anything
sexuality
with studies in it.
It's any of the studies. There's a kind of irony here, because whenever there are these new women's studies, gay studies, whatever studies, the studies always likes and approves of the thing that it's studying, except for American studies. That is the one studies department that actually despises the object of its studies. When did these crop up? When did the Deputy Assistant Dean of Inclusion and Sexual Studies, when did this happen and start gutting our university?
How surprised are you going to be to find out it was the late 1960s?
There were a lot of things going on around that time.
But really, that was part of it. There was the big cultural kind of change that was happening in the late 60s and going into the 70s, following civil rights and all of this. And the university really wanted to be on the vanguard of that. They wanted to showcase diversity, and they wanted to have more scholars that were women and that were of racial minorities, and try to be on the forefront of making a more diverse professional class.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go.
Well, not quite
chanting
yet,
around.
But now. And what happened was they started to create these kind of boutique departments around very politically fashionable ideas like women's studies, feminist studies, race studies, etc. And because of a number of factors that can get pretty complicated, and it's a lot of inside baseball, they never really got challenged.
Exactly.
They also simultaneously picked up the very fashionable postmodern deconstructive philosophy for doing their stuff. So
this is what I want to actually get to, because I saw dear old Yale crumbling during just my 4 years there. I saw this really pick up fast. I mean, you had kids screaming at their professors by the time I graduated. One thing I notice is that we all agree on reality. We all agree that reality exists.
Exactly.
We're arguing over these facts. There's also this radical subjectivism now, which says there's no truth. There's your truth and my truth. Where does that idea come from, and where is that leading us, and how do we fight that? Well, we have a whole minute left, so I'm sure you can answer that that question.
The deep answer is that's postmodern deconstruction. It goes back to the 60s, these French philosophers. The narrow answers in the late 80s and 90s, it took a turn. You had race scholars like Kimberly Crenshaw and gender scholars like Judith Butler, who were saying things like, we know identity must be real because oppression based on identity is real. And if we want to change things, if we want to have effective activism, progressive activism, we need to admit that those are real and then continue to use our deconstructive methods to deconstruct the conversations around those objects. So we agree on reality existing, and we mean one particular thing by it. They would say they agree that reality exists also, but that it's rooted in the one real thing is oppression based on identity, which is always based on
and the moral oppression, the clearer view of reality.
This is such a brilliant observation. I have never heard this before, but you have explained it. Sometimes when I'm on college campuses, people ask me, they say, how is it that the intersectional left can so embrace identity as this absolute, but then they become subjectivists when it gets to identity. A man can be a woman, a white lady can be a black lady, it's all kind of fluid. And your answer is because of the reality of the oppression. So as long as you can claim victimhood, as long as you can claim oppression, the details of the identity from which you get the oppression, that's all malleable. It's just all about the oppression, the grievance, this.
And the more oppression variables one has, the clearer view of reality.
Yeah, that's called standpoint epistemology, which is a kind of related thing to another thing called critical constructivist epistemology. This all has like real deep, I mean, it's real academic stuff.
Right.
We called critical constructivist epistemology grievance studies. It's a little bit easier to grasp what's going on there. And the idea with these, especially standpoint epistemology, is that there's always a power dynamic. And if you're on the upside of the power dynamic, you are, let's say, a man who lives in a man's world. So you have one perspective, man and man. But if you're a woman who lives in a man's world, now you have the woman perspective. And because you live in the man's world, you have the man perspective too. Therefore, you know more things.
Right.
Plus, you get to claim oppression and victimhood.
And you add another variable to that, black, disabled,
they get
trans.
even more what do they call it? Strong objectivity, is what Sandra Harding called that.
Yeah.
You get more access to know the truth in your personal subjective experience by having oppression in a
as a Christian, that must be horrific.
Truly shocking. Truly, the entire world is upside down.
Right.
This is so interesting, though, and it's why I love that real academic people such as yourselves did this hoax, because the hoax it's really funny. An ethnography of breastaurant masculinity, themes of objectification, sexual conquest, and masculine toughness in a sexually objectifying restaurant. That was accepted and published. I mean, just wonderful. Our struggle is my struggle. Solidarity feminism as an intersectional reply to neoliberal and choice feminism.
This is a chapter of Mein Kampf.
That's a chapter of Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler.
Right.
I mean, these are really funny, but it's not just a ha-ha, look how ridiculous the other side is.
Right.
They do have a coherent train of thought.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's why it's perverse.
These aren't even actually hoaxes. We started with hoaxes. We failed to get hoaxes in. The first 6 papers we wrote all failed. They couldn't get in. So we started to actually learn how they think and write the papers in accordance with what really is grievance studies. We became grievance scholars ourselves, in a sense. And we learned to think like they do. We understood their comic book universe where, sometimes people can fly or whatever. And we wrote accordingly. And then we uncovered some pretty serious issues.
So they have this tight ecosystem in coherence. In philosophy, we call it coherence theory. All these nodes in a matrix of belief, they all cohere together, and it does make an ecosystem. And the Batman, Superman, or
it's like
DC
in the
Marvel.
Batman universe, right? Batman can do a lot of cool stuff, but he can't fly. So if you wanted to write a fan comic and you make Batman fly, everybody's going to be like, "What? He needs like a hang glider or something."
Right. Of course, yes, and this. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I have to let people know where to find you. On Twitter, @Peter Boghossian. Jim, you can find on Twitter, @ConceptualJames. There's a documentary coming out, I think.
There's a documentary.
It should be later this year.
Mike Nana's
doing a documentary on this, which is, I'm glad you brought this up here at the end. It isn't a hoax. What you have done is gone in, identified not just how the grievance studies illogic thinks, but you have gotten these papers peer-reviewed and published.
Recognized for excellence.
Recognized for excellence. You really, it is outrageous to call it a hoax. You could call the whole field a hoax, but you couldn't call what you have done a hoax. It is so important. If we want to combat this nonsense, if we want to try to save the university, save liberal education, you have to be able to actually understand how these people think, how they have gone so wrong in their trains of thought. Only then can you come back and get back to a sane reality.
We very much want to restore confidence in the academy, and that confidence and trust has been eroded not only in the peer review system, but in the whole academy.
The whole institutional structure.
I think you're doing God's work, both of you atheists. Thank you so much for being here, Peter.
It.
Jim, we got to go. Great to have you. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Those are the first guys who could explain to me some of the contradictions within the intersectional left. I hope people pay attention to them because they've really got an insight here that explains so much of the craziness and all the shrieking kids on college campuses and all the other nonsense flitting about our culture. We've got a lot more to get to. We've got to get to Kamala Harris, that seductress Kamala Harris launching her political career, apparently, with a married man. But before we get to that, it's time for you to get on the right side of history, which is in fact the title of Ben Shapiro's new book. It officially hits stores March 19th, but if you go to rightsideofhistory.com, you can order your copy right now before they sell out. Do it. You will thank me later. It pains me to say nice things about Ben earnestly on the show, but I have to do it. The book is very good. The book is really, really good. I read an early draft of it, and so he's, I think, even punched it up a little bit since then, and it was excellent. I read all these books that come out, all these popular books, many of which are not very good, and Ben's is like the answer to that book. I hope it sells a zillion copies. It would be really helpful to the culture, so go check it out. Okay, I won't say any more earnest, nice things about Ben. Go to dailywire.com. So much more to get to, but you got to go. It's $10 a month, $100 for an annual membership. You get me, you get the Andrew Klavan Show, you get the Ben Shapiro Show, you get Ask Questions in the Mailbag, you get the Matt Walsh Show. It has questions on Backstage, which is coming up. You'll get to ask, get your mailbag questions in, by the way, for tomorrow. You get to see Another Kingdom. You get everything. You get this. This is the, you know what this is? This is the Pike Place roast of leftist tears. This is that Howard Schultz is going to reelect Donald Trump and spoil it for the Democrats, sort of, You know, some people say that Pike Place is bitter. I think it's just perfectly sweet. Yum, yum, It's sweet and salty in the leftist tears tumbler. It's like kettle corn of some sort. Go to dailywire.com. We'll be right back.